Hello and welcome to a new video. If you're new here, hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Laura. I like to talk about books. I like to read books, do little bookish vlogs and challenges, and I post every Fridays and then the first Monday of the month. If you're coming back, well, you already know all that, but it's always nice to see you again. So a couple of videos back, I did a video where I talked about BookTok books and whether or not they were worth the hype. So I wanted to do a kind of similar like book recommendation sit down video. Except this time I'm going to be giving book recommendations depending on your mood, because I've seen a lot of videos like this and I think they're quite fun, and I know a lot of people are mood readers. I myself am kind of, it depends. I am sometimes a mood reader. Most of the time I did not used to be. I used to be really good at giving myself a TBR at the beginning of the month and reading literally nothing but that the entire month. Since starting this YouTube, actually I've gotten a bit worse at that, as I'm sure you would know if you watch my recap videos. I don't always read my TBR, but I'm still definitely, I wouldn't say I'm a full mood reader. Definitely okay at sticking to a TBR, but sometimes I just want a really specific book. I want it to give me that specific feeling, and so we have a slightly precarious stack of books here, of books for different types of mood. I've kind of got a little bit of everything. I have forgotten my categories. Okay, so I have 8 categories I'm going to talk about today, and these book recs are mostly fantasy. We also have a little bit of romance, a little bit of science fiction, and a little bit of mystery, but the main genre that I read and I talk about on the channel is fantasy, so most of these books are fantasy. We have books where you're low-key rooting for the bad guy, heartwarming books, books to get you out of a reading slump, books with a social commentary, books for nostalgic 2000s vibes, books that are for the vibes, not for the plot, books that are really sad non-fiction, and fun, silly little romances. So those are the categories we're going to be talking about today. I have 2 book recs for each category. That means 16 books in total. These are all books that I really enjoyed, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be recommending them. I think the lowest is probably 3.5 stars. So we've got a lot to get through, so I think without any further ado, I'm just going to get into it. So grab yourself a nice warm or cold drink and let's get right into the video. Definitely should have started with like the books at the top, but it's okay. We're just gonna precariously risk these books every time I want to talk about a different category. There we go. So the first category that I'm going to talk to, books where you're low-key rooting for the villain and or when the main character is kind of like morally grey villainy. So we have 2 books, obviously 2 book recs for each category. These are both first books in trilogies. So the first book is Furyborn by Claire Legrand. If you've been watching my videos, you have definitely seen me talk about this book. It was my favourite trilogy that I read last year, 2025, and it is so good. For one, it is so good, it is so unique. But basically in this we follow Riel and Eliana, who are actually 1,000 years apart. So Riel is 1,000 years in the past and Eliana is 1,000 years in the future. Basically there's a prophecy about both of these women, and throughout the book you kind of discover how they're connected despite being 1,000 years apart, what the prophecy is, what it all means, and it's just really good. The last book is devastating, but what I really like in this is that not only is the main villain, I would say, not only does he like, he's not just a villain at first, like when you're introduced to him you don't necessarily recognize him as like a villain, but he also kind of corrupts one of our main characters, and there's a whole storyline with that where you actually see one of these main characters as a villain in the story, and they kind of become a villain of the story, but it's done in such a good way. And then they have obviously like what's it called, a 360, a 180 character arc type thing, and they come back to being a good guy. But I don't want to talk too much about it obviously because it would be kind of spoilers for the series. But basically yeah, the villain is not just like, you don't see them purely as the villain who's trying to kill people and do bad things. There's also a deeper aspect to the villain, and then one of our main characters is like properly morally grey, and I really enjoyed that. I think they did it really well, where you understand where they're coming from when they're doing these horrible acts, and like when they're becoming the villain, kind of, you fully understand and empathize with them, but you're also like, ooh, you need to stop this. This is a really unique trilogy that I think everyone should read, and I think it's an absolute disgrace that this is not more popular on BookTok, because it is so good, it is so well written, and I feel like there's just no way to dislike this series. Then we have The City of Brass. So this is book 1 in the Daevabad trilogy. I've seen this a little bit on Book Talk, but it's still not as popular as it should be because this trilogy is a god tier trilogy for me. I love it so much. I love all the characters, I love the character relationships. Basically in this you have our main character Nari, who's a con artist living in Cairo, and she accidentally awakens this like 1,000-year-old jinn, and so this jinn then takes her into the world of the jinn. She gets brought into the city of brass, so Daevabad, that's what the city is called, and she kind of gets brought into the world. You find out that Nari's actually connected to this universe. She didn't like get brought here coincidentally, and it is just so much bigger than that. It's so expansive. The politics in this is so good, but also this is one of those cases where like the bad guy, they're a bad guy in the story, but you 100% understand where they're coming from. Like they are a bad guy because they have had like horrible things happen to them for like valid reasons. Even if you don't agree with those reasons, you can still recognize that like they're low-key valid based off of their life experiences. But also one of the like bad guys in this is actually, he's not just a bad guy, and it's actually really sad at the end. Like I was not ready for the ending of these books, but these are really good. And also really just throughout the whole book series, who the bad guys kind of changes and what you think of people, like where you place them on like a moral scale of good versus bad. Different characters are on both sides of the scale, and I think that's really realistic because not everyone's like good or evil. A lot of people are a mix of both, and so I thought this was really interesting with how it dealt with that and kind of kept us on our toes as to who was like the bad guy, and also had us empathizing with the bad guy. Next up we have heartwarming feel-good books. So both these books are also, well, we have a cozy fantasy and like a science fiction fantasy. I still don't know which one it is. I looked it up and it is both science fiction and fantasy. But these are just books that when I finished them, I was literally like smiling. I was so happy. I would definitely recommend these books if you're feeling a bit down and you just want to read to lift you up. Like basically these books, like the personification, the book version of a warm hug. So obviously first, again, I've talked about this book before, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea. More importantly, I would say the second book, Somewhere Beyond the Sea, I think it's called. I absolutely loved this series. TJ Klune writes just such cozy books. The cast of characters in this is such an amazing fan family that like at the end of it, basically you feel like you've been integrated into their family. That's how connected you get to the characters. This first one, I did enjoy it. It was definitely a warm hug, cozy, heartwarming, but the second one, like I almost cried tears of joy, and that's how happy I was reading this book. These books are really just uplifting. I think they would be perfect for if you're feeling a little bit down, or if you really just want like a mood boost. I think this book's perfect. Just if you're looking for a positive vibe book, this is it. Basically in this book you have Linus Baker, who is a social worker, and he gets sent to an orphanage with a bunch of magical beings to make sure that these like children aren't going to become threats, even though they're children, so like the danger shouldn't really be there. And basically, so at first Linus like lives in the city, and he's kind of like unhappy in his life. He's got a desk job. He always dreams on going away to the ocean, and then the orphanage he gets sent is on the ocean, so he gets really happy. And throughout this book he kind of like comes out of his shell and realizes that everything he thought he was doing as important, like he thought his job was important, and even though he was unhappy in the city and he was at his desk job, he thought he was doing good work. But he realizes when he comes here that like this is what happiness is, and that life should be about happiness and the people around you instead of like your work. I feel like I'm describing it weirdly, but basically yeah, he kind of, this place opens his eyes about how good life can actually be, and he just gets so accepted. And obviously there's a little thing between him and Arthur Parnassus, who is the headmaster of the orphanage, and it is just honestly the coziest, cutest book. Then we have Once and Future by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. This is a science fiction fantasy. I loved both of these books. They are just a really fun, cozy queer fantasy. Again, this one is also one where you have a found family that at the end of it you basically feel like you've been integrated into this found family. I was actually sad to finish the second book. I was sad to see these characters go because I just grew to love them so much over the course of the two books. This one is a King Arthur retelling, so you follow Ari, who is a reincarnation of King Arthur, but like thousands of years in the future from the original King Arthur story, so in a future where people live in space because the earth has become uninhabitable. And in this there's also some like intergalactic power. They're not really the political power, they're more like a commercial power that then through that commercial power becomes a political power, and so there's some talk of like overthrowing them because they're oppressive, like every intergalactic power, I guess. You don't have any that aren't oppressive, it would seem. I would say the second book is actually better than the first one. The second book, they go back to like the OG King Arthur timeline and they interact in that story, and I thought that was just really different than any other King Arthur retelling that I'd read. And it was also really fascinating to like take these characters that are so used to being in space and with really different norms than something that's 1,000 years in the past for them, more than 1,000 years in the past, and put them in this like medieval earth place, and that was really interesting. But mainly what makes this book amazing is the cast of characters, and they're all just so found family. Like, they come from such different walks of life, but then they, like, over the course of the book and even just before the book, they like find each other and they fall in love and they become such a group of people, and honestly I really love them. But it's also like a funny book. There were times when I was actually laughing. I had the Kindle version for the book too, and there were just some parts I highlighted because they made me like laugh, and so I really like that. I like when a book is at once like heartwarming and is making me laugh, because you just know it's a really happy, positive book and you're gonna just take away such a joyful feeling from it. Okay, next up we have books to get you out of a reading slump. These are books that are just fast-paced, action-filled, you keep turning the page, the type of book where it's like, I'll just read one more chapter and then you finish the book and you don't know where the time went. So the first book we have is The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. The plot twists in this is actually crazy. It's one of those books where you think you know the situation at the beginning, and then the situation flips itself on its head, and then you think you know the situation again, and then it flips itself on its head again. It's just crazy. This is a YA mystery, but honestly I think it's for all ages. It's just that interesting. I love her endings. The ending of this is just not what you'd expect. So throughout the book there are plot twists, and then the ending itself is like a huge plot twist. So this is just full of twists and turns, and so I feel like if you're slumping, this is a perfect book because it's really fast paced and you just immediately get into it. Like, knowing the title, you already wonder what's happening. So Belle is 18 years old and her mum went missing when she was 2. They've started making a documentary about her mum's disappearance because it was quite a big thing when it happened, because it was like never solved, and so they start making a documentary, and then just one day her mum shows up completely fine. You don't know what happened to her already. Just that, you're really, just from reading the blurb, you're immediately hooked because you want to know, well, why was she gone for 16 years and why does she suddenly come back? So even just before that, the book gets you hooked into it, and so I think it's guaranteed to get you out of a slump. Then we have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. So I think this is literary fiction. It might be a literary thriller. I think the story is just so addictive. I myself personally read this when I was in the beginning of a reading slump and it got me right out of it. I think I read this in like 2 days. I just could not put it down. I was so addicted. It follows June Hayward, who is like a struggling writer, and she's friends with Athena Liu, who is like a really successful writer. And basically at the beginning of the book, June Hayward watches Athena Liu die. So already it's kind of like, interesting. We start off this way, how's it gonna go? She discovers, because she's at Athena Liu's house, she finds an almost finished manuscript that Athena Liu has been writing, and so she takes it and publishes it as her own work, and then she gets really successful from that. And you see how this decision kind of snowballs and becomes something so much bigger than you'd expect, and the consequences that come from it. This is also really interesting because obviously our main character is kind of an unlikable character, but obviously you're supposed to dislike her because she does kind of horrible things, so she's definitely a morally grey character. But I think it's just such a fascinating book. I think it's such an interesting main character because there's someone that you really don't like, but you also recognize that you're not supposed to like her because she's problematic, but at the same time you find yourself rooting for her almost against your will because she's the protagonist, you know, so you want her to succeed. And so I could not put it down because I could not wait to see how this book was ending and also where it was going. I did not expect it to be as quick to read when I picked it up. I thought it would maybe be a bit hard to get into, but no, I was immediately sucked into the story and it was just so fast paced that I could not put it down. Next off we have fantasy with a kind of political slash social commentary. This is personally one of my favorite subcategories of fantasy. I absolutely love it when my books find a way to have a social critique. So first off we have Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. This is such a good book. I read it a couple months ago and I absolutely loved it. I could not put it down. We follow Siona, who becomes the first female mage to get admitted into like the head mage society. Because these mages are all men and they're all sexist, they assign her a janitor as an assistant instead of a real lab assistant. But her and this janitor, who is a immigrant, so basically you have like this main city which is in Protective Dome, and then you have the entire outside world, which is like really dangerous because there's this thing called the Blight, which is randomly, like, it's almost like lightning. It just randomly kills people, animal, plants, anything that has like life. And so it means that outside of the city life is really inhospitable. And so he was an immigrant who came from the outside world, and he's the last of his people, him and his niece, and so he just has a different perspective. So with her being a woman and his different perspective, they uncover this huge secret about magic and about this city that completely changes everything you thought you knew and everything they thought they knew. And it's just really interesting how this book deals with them like coping with this discovery. They both have like different perspectives on this revelation and how they should deal with it. And then I just think the ending as well is so fascinating. It has a commentary on kind of, I would say, immigration and how countries exploit immigrants but also try and manipulate them into thinking that they should feel grateful to the country for letting them in and making them do the worst jobs and the least paid jobs. It was just so well written so well developed, especially considering this is a standalone and it's not that big. It's just over 400 pages, and the ending was actually did not see it coming and low-key traumatic. Low-key not recovered from that ending. Next up we have The Everlasting by Alex C. Harrow. This was a 5-star read. If you watch this channel, you know that I love Alex C. Harrow. This is again a kind of King Arthur retelling. This one's really more like it goes from the baseline of the King Arthur story and then is something very, very different. You follow Sir Una Everlasting, who was like this famous knight back in Dominion's heyday, so like King Arthur, and then the other main character is Owen Mallory, who is a historian in like the present day. So this is an alternate universe, but it's basically like our world. So he is a historian who is obsessed with Sir Una's story because obviously she's like the founding story of Dominion, and so her story really shaped society and how it is today. And basically this book is really interesting because it deals with how history and the way it's told and the choices made in what gets told and what doesn't get told and who's the villains and who's the good guys, how they shape society today. And I think it takes a really literal approach to that because obviously that's quite a metaphorical thing and you wouldn't necessarily see it concretely in society, but because in this basically Owen Mallory, not gonna give too much, but basically just gets sent back in time and that alters history, and so you see what different choices then the impact they have on today's society. A literal approach to the idea that stories that we tell impact our society. But I absolutely love this book. I thought it was really well done, and once again this is a standalone. This is even short. It's like 350 pages. Got to the end and I was like, what do you mean that was only 350 pages? I felt like we got so much story, so much character development, so much knowledge. And also, well, Alex C. Harrow is a historian herself, and so you can really tell the way she writes her books. I think the history in this was so well developed and it was just so well like thought out, the way that she took this like metaphorical thing that is the impact history has on us and made it literal, something that literally anyone reading this understands the message she's trying to convey, and I just thought that was really, really interesting. Next off we have 2 book recommendations for if you're feeling kind of nostalgic for the books you read when you were younger, so like the 2000s/2010s books, those typical book genres, because I myself have recently been feeling like really nostalgic for that time because there are a lot of book series that were popular back then that I just missed out on because I didn't read as much back in the day. These 2 are popular series, so I'm probably not teaching you anything new, but I'm just like, if you haven't read these, you are missing out and you should definitely read them. So first off we have The City of Bones. This is the first book in the Shadowhunters universe and the first book in the Mortal Instruments series. So the Mortal Instruments series is 6 books. I read the first 3. This, I know it was popular, I think this book came out in 2000, yeah, this book came out in 2007, so I was born in 2005, so this book came out actually just after I was born, but I know it was like really popular at the time for like middle school and high school because this is YA fantasy, and I think it mostly holds up. I would say there are definitely some plot points that would not get published today, but I think that's also part of the charm. So this you follow Clary, who is a high school student, and her mum goes missing and she discovers that like there's this whole universe she didn't know about, so with like demons and werewolves and vampires and all those creatures, and then she meets the Shadowhunters, who are kind of like tasked with protecting New York City from these creatures, and she kind of like gets taken under their wing. And this universe is so expansive. I think there are 4 book series and then 2 or 3 spin-off novellas. They're just so expansive and the world building is crazy, and there's a reason this series was like so popular back in the day and still holds up today because they're just that good. Next up we have, of course, The Hunger Games. This nice special edition book which I am so happy with. But The Hunger Games, I mean, they're a classic. Everyone knows The Hunger Games. Everyone's probably seen the movies, but not everyone read the book. I would say, as I always say, definitely read the book. The book is always better than the movie. There's a reason the book came first, and like the movie's based off the book, so it can never be as good. This you follow Katniss, who lives in like a future dystopian version of America called Panem, which is split into 12 districts. So you have District 1, which is like the most rich, and then District 12, which is the most poor. So she is in District 12, and then each year they have these Hunger Games, so you get 2 tributes from each district from between 12 and 18 years old who get chosen at random and go and compete in the games, and there's only one winner. So Katniss's sister gets chosen, but she volunteers in her place because her sister's like 12 years old and she doesn't want her sister to die, and so she gets sent into the games. This book is mostly just the games, but it's the beginning, and Katniss eventually through this series becomes like a figurehead for the revolution that's kind of trying to overthrow the system of districts and everything, which is a very unequal society. So this holds up because it is such an interesting and important social commentary, and no book has managed to do it anything like it. But it also, even though it is written years ago, because I guess it's in a dystopian future society, it doesn't feel old. It feels definitely very, very topical and very relevant, even though this book was written in 2008, so almost like 20 years ago, which is crazy. These books are just actually so good, and so many books that are in today are very clearly inspired by the Hunger Games and try and recapture some of like the magic that made these books so good, but obviously they never achieve it as good because these are the originals, and so they're just the best. Next up, we have books that kind of, not all vibe, no plot, but the main thing that gets you reading this book is definitely like the vibe and the characters more so than the plot. So first off, we have The Night and the Moth. This one, honestly, the plot was solid. It was just nothing new. It didn't really surprise me. Like, there was one plot twist at the end, but overall the plot was your fairly basic like fantasy plot. However, this was a 5-star read for me, and I absolutely loved it because it was so atmospheric, and the characters, I love them so much. You have some, quite frankly, unique characters. Considering the plot isn't that unique, I would say the characters were quite unique, especially Bartholomew, who's literally a gargoyle, like a talking gargoyle. Never read a single other book with a gargoyle, let alone a talking one. So I really like this. Basically, you follow Sybil, who is a diviner. They have dreams that can tell a person's future. And so the new king comes to find out what his future is, and just after that happens, her fellow diviners, there are 6 of them I think, and they start going missing. They just like every night one of them disappears, and so Sybil enlists the help of Roderick, who is one of the king's knights, to like figure out where they went and what's happening and if she's like going to be next. I just loved it, and I do think the plot is like I said, the plot is decent. It's just nothing new, nothing that surprising. It's really the characters that are just so funny and so real. The vibe is very atmospheric, very like you really feel it, but I thought this was absolutely really well written, and I love the story. Despite being normally a very plot focused person, the fact that this plot was nothing new did not even slightly bother me, and I loved it so much because of the characters. Then we have the Dreamer trilogy. So this is the first book, Call Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. This is a spin-off from the Raven Boys, which I read first, and which honestly I will say is probably a better series, but I didn't have that in physical, so I'm going to be talking about this one. I also read this one a lot more recently. So in this, you follow Ronan Lynch, who is a dreamer, which basically means, so yeah, first off, the magic system in this is really unique. So a dreamer is when you sleep, you can bring back things from your dreams. So you can either have an intentional dream where you decide what to bring back, or if you have a regular dream, then you bring something back unintentionally. This book is definitely very focused on the environment and like ley lines and all that, and how important like environment is to magic. The environment and the magic system are definitely very linked. This is just such a unique series of Raven Boys as well. I think Maggie Stiefvater really writes such unique atmospheric series. This one, the plot honestly is kind of confusing and sometimes lacking, but the vibes and the characters are just so good, and the writing style is so good that I really did not care, and these were all 4-star books in this trilogy for me. I think the character development in these series is actually crazy. This series definitely has a knack of making you really invested in the characters, whether that be really annoyed at them because they're doing stupid things, or just in love with them because they're your babies. For example, Ronan and Adam, so the main couple in this, they are my babies. I love them so much. But yeah, this one, the plot is definitely not necessarily there in these series. You definitely read them for the vibes, for the characters, and for the writing style. Okay, then we have just silly, fun little romances. When you're looking for something really unserious, when it's just going to be a nice romance, it's going to have you giggling, it's going to have you kicking your feet, you're going to fall in love with both characters, and you know, just a silly fun time. So first off, we have Throttled by Lauren Asher. This is an F1 romance. I love F1, so it's no surprise that I love this book. This is book 1 in 4 interconnected standalones, so you follow 4 different F1 drivers from 2 different teams, but I really like this one. This is really fun. So you follow Noah and Maya. This is a brothers rival romance. Noah is Maya's brother's teammate, but they don't necessarily get along because Noah's slightly an older driver, and then Maya's brother is like new and up and coming, and so they're obviously competing because they're on the same team and everything, and they both want to win the championship. Maya goes along with the brother on like the F1 season because she starts vlogging it after she finishes university, and over the course of that, obviously her and Noah get close, and well, I'll let you guys read it to find out. But I did not expect to like this as much as I did. I literally just picked up because it was F1. I'm not a huge kind of adult romance reader, an all romance reader really, but I loved this so much. It was exactly what I needed when I read it. It was really just like a goofy, silly, fun time. It's really quick to read, really fast paced. It's only about 350 pages. It literally had me giggling, kicking my feet. I loved it so much, especially because Noah just was so down bad for Maya. Like at the beginning of the book, obviously it's the typical like broody man, he doesn't care, but then at the end he literally worshipped the ground she walked on, and I love that so much for this couple. I think each book can definitely be read as a standalone because it's, you know, interconnected series, so you could read just this one on its own, you could start with the second one. Then we have Lessons in Faking. This is a new 5-star read. I read it just last week and I absolutely loved it. I read it in 2 days. I could not put it down. So this is also a brother's rival. I'm realizing both these book facts that I'm giving you are the same, so who knows, maybe that's like a trope I like, it would seem. But this is fake dating, and fake dating is definitely a trope that I absolutely love. So basically you have Atalia Presley, whose twin brother Henry, their parents died when they were 15, and ever since that Henry's been quite standoffish and more focused on like his school and keeping his life very organized, and he only really pays attention to Atalia when she's like in trouble. So she decides to get his attention that she is going to pretend to date his rival, his soccer nemesis, Dylan McCarthy. Dylan McCarthy is honestly one of my favorite book boyfriends. He is actually god tier book boyfriend for me. I love him so much. So at the beginning they do have a kind of like a rival banter, and it is fake dating, and I think fake dating is so fun. But this book is a little more than just a silly goofy romance. It also deals with, well, her grief over her parents dying and realizing that, well, her brother, her only like remaining family, and her aren't that close. It was just so fun. Literally the whole time I was reading this I was giggling and kicking my feet. This is really the perfect light-hearted escapist romance. And then last but not least, this is kind of a really specific mood. I just want to include these two books. There we go. It's my channel, I make the rules. And that is kind of like when you want to read sad books and you're really not fussed about what genre. So we have two books, both non-fiction, both autobiographies. So the first one is I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I would say the two books that I have here are good intros to autobiographies, because for one, they're both really good. So there we go. But for two, they also both, I think an autobiography is a good way to get into non-fiction, because if you are reading non-fiction, you're completely new to it, I think it helps to have already an interest point. And so autobiographies, you can pick one up that's about your favorite social media character, your favorite actor, your favorite singer, and so therefore you've already got a point of interest, so you're more likely to enjoy the book and want to keep reading it than if you just picked up a completely random non-fiction book. So this one follows Jeanette McCurdy from when she's like 6 years old over like 20 years of her life, and she talks about her relationship with her mother and how being a child star affected that relationship. She talks about her eating disorder and how her mother affected her eating disorder and all that, and it's just such an interesting and well-written book. I know they're making a TV show with Jennifer Aniston and I cannot wait. That's going to be so good, but I love this. It was a 5-star read for me. It was just really interesting, but it's like a hard read because obviously she deals with some heavy topics. So she deals with eating disorders, she deals with her really unhealthy relationship with her mother. It's just really well written, but it does deal with some hard-hitting topics, so I would definitely check your trigger warnings before reading this book, obviously. But I thought it was so good because it's quite short and it's quite fast-paced, and it's honestly like, it's crazy. I was reading this and I'm like, what do you mean this is like your actual life? This is crazy. The stuff that happened to you would think it's fiction, but no, it is her real and actual life. And so I think this is definitely a good one if you want to get into non-fiction because it's so addictive. And then we have Friends, Lovers and the Big Terrible Thing, which is Matthew Perry's autobiography. So Matthew Perry is obviously Chandler from Friends. This is the first autobiography I read, and I just picked it up because I love Friends and Chandler is one of my favorite characters, and I found out he wrote the book and I wanted to read it, and I read it just after he died as well, so it was not a good decision. That was definitely impacted how sad I was when reading this book. This is a really well written, really good, really sad autobiography by Matthew Perry, which talks about obviously his whole life. It starts when he's a child and follows him up until when he wrote this. He wrote this before he died, which is really sad as well because the ending is actually traumatic, because the main topic of this book, aside from obviously his fame, is his battle with addiction, so both to alcohol and to drugs. And so definitely, again, check your trigger warnings, but it's really beautiful honestly, because at the end he's kind of on the other side of it, and so he talks about wanting to start a family, wanting to fall in love, wanting to continue growing and aging and getting better as he goes along. Except reading this after he died was actually traumatic because it was so sad reading the end, which was so full of hope and life, and reading it after he's died and hasn't been able to achieve these things. It was actually horrible. If you are a fan of Friends and Chandler, and if you were torn up by Matthew Perry's death, I would read this, but fair warning, you are going to sob. It was really funny, especially considering it deals with such heavy topics and made me so sad. I was really impressed by how it managed to also make me laugh at times. But yeah, so these are both books I think are really good if you're looking to get into non-fiction. I would definitely recommend autobiographies. there you go, this is all the books I want to talk about today. I hope you guys got some good recommendations, some books that you want to add to your TBR from this. I had a lot of fun talking about these books. I tried to keep it books that weren't necessarily huge on Book Talk, especially because my last one, like I said, I was just talking about popular Book Talk books, so I want to talk about something a bit different, books that you may not have seen before, may not have heard before, and also books that I think definitely deserve more hype, so it was also partially because of that. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. I hope you got some good book recs. Let me know in the comments what you thought of these books, if you read them, or even just if there are any that you now want to pick up. But anywho, we are at the end of this video, and that means there's only one thing left to do, and that is say goodbye. Have an absolutely wonderful week, and I will see you next Friday for a little reading vlog this time. Until then, bye.